Democratic presidential contenders certainly revved up their attacks on each other at the debates in the Motor City this week. They also had substance-filled exchanges on policy and race. The debates revealed a party united against President Trump, but at odds over parts of the president's record. That's President Obama, and whether an overhaul of the nation's health care system is necessary.
Medicare for All is comprehensive. It covers all health care needs. For senior citizens, it will finally include dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses.
But you don't know.
Second of all,
you don't know that,
second
Bernie.
of all,
We'll come to you in a second,
I do know, and I wrote the damn bill.
This notion that you're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans.
We are the Democrats. We are not about trying to take away health care from anyone.
Former Vice President Joe Biden fended off rivals, including a former member of the Obama cabinet.
The fact of the matter is, you should be able to, if you cross the border illegally, you should be able to be sent back. It's a crime.
Mr. Vice President, it looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't.
The Washington Post, Dan Balls offered this frank analysis, quote, "The candidates had done much to make a case against one another as much as they did against the president. And they didn't offer much in the way of an aspirational message or connecting directly with the voters." Joining me tonight is Dan Balls, chief correspondent for the Washington Post, Hallie Jackson, chief White House correspondent for NBC News, Tarini Pardee, national politics reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and our friend Joshua Green, national correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek. A frank assessment, Dan. What did we learn about the Democrats this week?
Well, we learned two things, and I think two different things. The first debate, or first night of debating, I think we saw in bolder colors the ideological divisions that now exist in the party. You had the two most liberal candidates on stage, Senators Warren and Sanders, and you had a number of moderates on the stage. And the moderates went after the two liberals. And the liberals held their own, more than held their own, and I think dominated the debate. And I think it was symbolic of kind of the ascendance of the progressive wing of the party and the struggles that are now going on. It was a substantive debate, as you indicated. It was a very tough debate, but it was also quite different from what we saw the following night. The following night, we saw some of the same issues discussed, but in general, it was into the weeds on policy, and it was kind of a circular firing squad, and it left the party and a lot of people who are active Democrats looking for a nominee, a potential nominee, concerned that they're not seeing what they hope to see.
And it seemed to whet the appetite for the next debate because there are some key matchups, if you will, that we haven't seen on that stage. Notably, for example, Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Vice President Joe Biden, each of whom represent the two wings that Dan is talking about. There is a lot of anticipation in Democratic circles for those two to be on a stage together, face to face. I think what you saw this past week solidified the top tier candidates and the ones who just aren't going to be on that next debate stage come September. They will not qualify. The debate stage will not be as big. And I think that there are voters who are really eager to see a little bit of a smaller field here.
Why was there a reckoning on the Obama record?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, the issues that came up, immigration, the deportations that happened under the Obama administration, TPP, trade issues, those were things that he was criticized for by the progressive wing even when he was in office. We're just seeing the progressive wing now take hold of a bigger portion, it seems, of the party. There are more with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders as top contenders. There are a lot of progressives who are looking to them to sort of espouse those views, and they were critical of the president even then. But so now we're seeing that come up because obviously they're running for president, and those issues still matter very much to those progressive voters.
Vice President Biden seems to like the position of being the defender of that legacy.
That's exactly right. That's what his main message is. You know, he's been saying this is a chaotic time. I want to return to the normal, to the Obama presidency. He's kind of bringing up those cozy, comfortable feelings for voters. And so, you know, one of the ways that Democrats are trying to draw a contrast with him is by going after his record. And his clear defense seems to be, President Obama selected me to be his vice president. Therefore, voters like me. You know, what I did was good. The president remains popular. And, you know, you shouldn't attack President Obama's legacy.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of this also is a strategic imperative because Joe Biden is still leading the polls. And if you're one of these candidates and you want to move up, you need him to move down. And the only way to get there is to criticize his record, which by extension is criticizing the president's record. And we saw, I think, on both nights, but certainly in the second night, what a flashpoint that can be for the Democrats who are really torn between answering the question of do we want to simply restore the Obama-style Democratic Party, the White House, move beyond Trump, which Joe Biden and others like him are arguing, or, as Warren and Sanders have argued, do Democrats need a much bigger, bolder policy to draw voters to the polls to turn out and dispatch Trump in 2020?
You're talking to voters, Dan. What do Democratic voters want when they think about that question?
They want somebody who can beat President Trump. I mean, down deep, they want somebody who can beat President Trump. And I think Detroit didn't come close to answer that question for them. There wasn't anybody who really emerged in Detroit who has, I think, what a lot of people are looking for. We've been focused on the plans. I mean, Elizabeth Warren has risen because she has plans for everything, and this notion of I have a plan, everybody else has adopted it. And I think that the I have a plan has come at the expense of I have a vision. And what we did not see in Detroit were candidates who could come up from the details of their plans and talk about a bigger, broader, and more affirmative vision. I mean, there was very little humor on that stage. There was very little lightness. There was very little hope on that stage. And I think that Democrats know that you have to have some of that to be a successful candidate against President Trump or to be a successful candidate for president, period.
Right.
Hallie, you've sat down with many of these moderate candidates in recent weeks. Governor Hickenlooper, the former Colorado governor, Tim Ryan, the Ohio congressman. When they're thinking about that vision challenge that Dan's raising, do they see an opening for themselves, for the centrists in this race?
They certainly do. The question is whether voters see that lane, given that you already have a couple of heavy hitters who are trying to stake that out, particularly Joe Biden. And that's a question that you ask these candidates. Hey, let's be frank here, gentlemen, in this case. You are running in the same lane as somebody who has a lot more name recognition than you and has a lot more money, which is important for fundraising and organization, and who has a lot more standing in the polls and is going to end up on that next debate stage. What you hear from people like, for example, Tim Ryan, are things like, hey, we have got to focus on the middle class. They're looking squarely at these states that Donald Trump won and did well in 2016, saying you can't run Elizabeth Warren there. And I'm paraphrasing here, but that's the message, that a person like Bernie Sanders is not going to be somebody who can necessarily win Michigan, right, over Donald Trump. When you talk about who Democratic voters want and how there's no clear frontrunner, President Trump clearly sees some danger zones on that stage based on what he's been talking about over the last 3 days or so since those debates happened. And it's Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris.
Tarina, you wrote in the Wall Street Journal about one key moment, Senator Harris being challenged by Representative Gabbard of Hawaii about Senator Harris's record in California as a prosecutor. Why did that matter?
That was a key moment. You know, this is something that a lot of progressives, especially young black voters, have been concerned about, Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor. And this is something that she hasn't really been questioned on a national stage on yet. And so we saw that for the first time. And Congresswoman Gabbard, who really needed a moment, a breakout moment to stay in this race, really went after her on that. And we didn't really see Kamala Harris push back that much. She said she was proud of her work, but she didn't really want to go there. You know, she said later that she considers herself a front runner and does not consider Congresswoman Gabbard a front runner, and so she didn't see the point in engaging directly with her that much. She just kept saying that she was proud of her work.